So we're in Proverbs chapter 3, and I'm going to read part of the chapter, and then we'll work through it verse by verse. We'll read verses 1 through 18. I don't expect to get through all of them tonight. Verse 1 says, "My son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commands. For length of days and long life and peace they will add to you. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. Honor the Lord with your possessions, and with the first fruits of all your increase. So your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor detest his correction. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, just as a father the son in the son whom he delights. Happy is the man who finds wisdom, and the man who gains understanding. For her proceeds are better than the profits of silver, and her gain than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies, and all the things you may desire cannot compare with her. Length of days is in her right hand, and in her left riches and honor. Her ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are of peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all those who retain her." So, what kind of proverb is verses 1 through 18? Because there's a shift in verse 19 to actually more of a praising God than specifically a proverb. Well, okay. Any other ideas? This is a tougher one. It's more of a narrative than anything, but it doesn't fit in the narrative like we see in chapters 1 and chapter 2. But I really don't have another category to put it in, because Solomon is giving instructions, and it's all related. It's not just single individual snippets. So I'm going to call it a narrative, and we can debate that, because it's not that's not scriptural. It's just my interpretation of it. So, what is the story, or what is the narrative about verses 1 through 18? Advice from father to son. What kind of advice is, which we assume is still Solomon at this point, Solomon giving to his son? We don't know which son. Where to put his trust? Okay. Anybody else want to title this? New King James puts the title of Guidance for the Young. That's Paths to follow. If I were titling it, I would say The Value of Wisdom, because he's going to talk about a lot about the value of what you can gain from wisdom, what it will give you, how it will benefit you. So with that in mind, let's start in verses 1 and 2. "My son, do not forget my law, but let your heart keep my commands. For length of days and long life and peace they will add to you." So we're going to do this. Proverbs kind of does a couple verses together, so that's how we're going to take them. Verse 1, how does it relate to our window pane structure? What window would you put it in? Okay, paths, that's one I thought of. And again, there can be more than one that fit. Do you suggest any others? Okay. What's that? Okay. Yeah, the end. I said teachable. It says, do not forget, let your heart keep. So that's what I said. Has his son been told this information before? What do you think based on verses 1 and 2? Yeah. Do not forget. Let your heart keep. So there's a picture that the Solomon is not teaching his son this information for the first time. He has already been told this, or they have if it's more than one son, and he's about to be reminded or reinforced, told again. So how does verse 2 relate to wisdom? Right. And I would definitely agree with that. Is there any other ones that you think maybe fit? So if we say no, verse 2 is the end of the road, what is at the end of the road according to verse 2? Long life. What else? Peace. Does verse 2 mean if I do this, I am guaranteed to live a long time, live to be 100 or 110? No. Okay. So how would you explain what the idea that says length of days and long life and peace they will add to you? Okay, I mean that's a very pragmatic statement. If you follow wisdom, your life might be longer than if you follow foolishness. Okay, you will be at peace. Yeah, we're going to come back to that. Any other ideas about what it means? Or how you would explain the idea of long life being connected to wisdom? So here's what I came across that I thought was helpful. Solomon is describing a life worth living. Earthly joy and contentment and spiritual blessedness. No matter how long your life is, it's going to be valuable. It's going to be worth living. You're not going to be dealing with, as Althea said, the results of being foolish, so your life is going to be different. Now, what else is your life going to have? According to it, the verse 2 is peace. And does that mean you will not have conflict, not have problems? Everything will be smooth, easy, and wonderful if you follow wisdom. Okay. That's definitely not the biblical definition of peace. So how would you say, if that's not the case, that says your life is going to be easy and wonderful, no problems, what is Solomon saying to his son that comes in the idea of peace will be added to you if you follow wisdom? Okay, so there's no concern, no regrets maybe, or less regrets because you made the right choice. Okay, I hadn't thought of that. That fits. Peace of mind. And so the word here obviously is shalom in Hebrew, and it has to do more with completeness, wholeness. Your life is healthy, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, because you're following the right path. So that's what kind of peace comes from following wisdom's path. Not that your life will never have any problems, but things will be complete, will be whole, will be healthy in that respect. So how many of you guys says, this sounds good? A long life, a life worth living, and wholeness, completeness, healthiness in my life. You want that? Is this something you'd want? So the question is, are you remembering and keeping not just your parents' words and commands, but God's words and commands? If we want that, God says this is how you get it. Is that our response to it? This idea, this principle is going to be repeated in chapter 4 and chapter 5, that Solomon is going to reinforce these truths with us and with his children. Verses 3 and 4. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them about your neck. Write them on the tablets of your heart, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. All right, so how does verse 3 relate to our window pane of wisdom? Godly? Okay. Diligence? Okay, that's one that I thought of. I didn't think of godly, but I think that fits, Dan. Anything else that you would see? I would say because his father is talking, you could argue that it's teachable. He's listening to his father's voice rather than someone else's. You could also then add, which path are you on? Are you following the path that your father is telling you is good, or the one you want to follow? What are we to do, according to verse 3, with truth and mercy? Or mercy and truth, depending on if I put them in the right order. Cling to them, okay? Is that a different translation, Vicki, or is that yours translation? Okay, that's fine. So New King James says, bind them about your neck. So before we talk about what that might look like or what Solomon is trying to communicate to his son, what is mercy? I'm not going to argue what truth is. I think that's a concept we're all comfortable with. What is mercy? What is Solomon describing? Okay? So not giving someone what they deserve. Okay? The word in Hebrew is hesed, which talks about God being faithful regardless of what the Israelites did. So that picture comes into it that God is, we're supposed to be faithful, as Vicki said, regardless of what someone else does and how we treat them. So Solomon says, hesed, mercy, and truth, let not them forsake you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablets of your heart. What do you picture, or what comes into your mind when you read that description of what Solomon is teaching his son? Mm-hmm. Phylacteries. So Vicky's picturing phylacteries where the little wooden box that they would eat, not just priests, but any Hebrew could wrap around themselves and have scripture between your eyes and things like that. Okay? What else do you picture? What else might you be thinking when you read that description? I hadn't thought of that one. A sandwich board. Okay, that's pretty good. I mean, that's pretty close to it. Okay. All right. Okay. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablets of your heart. So let's bind them about your neck. I thought of a necklace, that it's right there so you can see it and others can see it. What about writing them on the tablets of your heart? Because that's not exactly... Go ahead, Matt.
What's in your heart is what you'll live, too. So if you're keeping his word in your heart, you're more apt to live it.
Right, and that's I believe what he's talking about. This is not just something you wear, like Vicki said, the phylacteries or a necklace or a string around your finger. It is something that you may do that with, but it's also you live out. You live out what you've been taught. It's not just something external, but Barb was talking about the diagram from the counseling conference. What's the root? Do you have good roots or do you have bad roots? That's going to dictate what comes out, what you produce, how you live, the fruit you produce. These are principles and convictions you live out, not just simply say I believe or have on your t-shirt or on your wristband or whatever, but you live them out. It's coming from the inside out. So that was verse 3. It says, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. So where does this verse fit into our window pane? Okay, I think that would fit. Others that you might think where this verse fits. How about the end is the one I thought of, and the other one I thought of was people, because you are moving from being simple to being wise, and it is shown by the fact how you are your relationship, your interactions with not only men, but God are coming about. So if we do this, what do we find or what do we have with God and man? What's that? A good reputation. So Solomon says, favor and high esteem. So anybody else have a different translation besides favor and high esteem? Good. Is that for the second one or the first one or second one? Favor and good understanding. Okay. Grace and good success. Yeah, the first word has a lot of connection with grace or goodwill from God and man towards this individual who's living right. High esteem can also have the idea of success, respect, the idea even that you are sought out for your counsel and your wisdom. And he says this is what other people and God, this is how they view you if you're living or when you're living in this way. So what does Solomon's son have to do to get this? To get this good reputation, to get favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man? Don't forget the teaching. Keep the commandments. Live them out. So this is not just a one-time thing. This is not just a momentary, well, I'm going to do this once and get it over with. This is a lifelong pursuit, a consistent, diligent pursuit by this young man or young men. So that means there's some seriousness about it. There's some effort involved. How serious are you about having mercy and truth as significant parts of your life? What are you willing to do to pursue them, to increase them, to gain them, to gain favor and high esteem from God and man? And on the other hand, what are you willing to say no to so you can get this result, to have this life that for length of days in peace? It doesn't just happen. We'd love it to just happen. I'd love that to just happen. But it takes consistent, disciplined, diligent choices and efforts, saying yes to the right thing and no to the wrong thing. So Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, probably the most famous verses, or one of the most famous set of verses in Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. All right, so where would you put verse 5 in our window pane? Teachable, okay. That's one that I thought of. Any others? What's that? Principle? Yep. Okay, that's another one. Who do you listen to? Who do you pay attention to? Whose voice do you hear? You could also say the priority, because it's the fear of the Lord, the respect of the Lord, and that you're listening to him and you're paying attention to what he has to say. How easy is it to trust someone else? I'm not talking about God. Someone else, and lean on their understanding or their wisdom compared with trusting yourself and your wisdom and your understanding? Depends on whether, yeah, if they agree with me, then I trust them. I like that, yeah. How easy is it to do that? Trust someone else, lean on their understanding. Okay? So if they're more knowledgeable, and we do this all the time, right? We're talking about doctors, we lean on them. Mechanics, if you don't know about cars, you lean on them. What if it's not something like that? What if they're just a person like you, and they're saying, I got this, I can, trust me, I know what I'm doing. How comfortable are you with leaning on them and trusting them?
When you're asking for direction, before GPS,
Mm-hmm.
and you were delivering, and you had to ask for directions, one of the things that you had to figure out was, does this guy know what he's talking about, or is he just trying to get rid of it?
Yeah, so Jim was using the illustration of ask before GPS and smartphones, stopping to ask directions. How much do you trust this person? And then are you going to follow the instructions they gave you to get from where you are to where you want to be? Hmm? Yeah, it says trust in the Lord with all your heart. And that's hard, right? It's easy to trust with part of your heart and be doubting with part of it, or to be trusting only a little bit. Why is it so hard to trust God completely? Or why is it so easy to trust yourself completely? Because that's what we're talking about. If we don't trust God completely, we're going to trust ourselves completely. Why is it so easy to trust ourselves versus trusting God? Okay, you want to be in control? That would be one that I would say. What else? Mm-hmm. You could put Habakkuk in this verse. I wasn't even thinking about that, Carl. I was thinking about the fact that, he's wrestling with, can I trust God with everything that's going on? Because I have questions and I don't have all the answers. At least if I trust in myself, I can give answers. Whether they're right or not, that's a different story. But I can fill in the blanks. And God doesn't always do that, at least not when we want or how we want. Verse 6. How does that relate to wisdom? Where would you put it on our window pane? Mm-hmm. That's one I thought might fit well. Which path are you on? Which direction are you going? Could be, yeah, that would fit. Yeah, part of the end, where you're going to end up. Also could be, you put principle in there. Who are you listening to? Because if you're trusting in the Lord and you're acknowledging Him, you've got to be listening to Him versus yourself or someone else. What is required, according to verse 6, for the Lord to direct your path? What's that? Submission. Okay. What else? Anything else? Okay, so bring Him in on the problem. Take the problem to Him. Let Him know, not that He doesn't know, but let Him know that you are looking to Him for help. Do you trust God? Yes or no? Okay, how much? Now this is a thought question, not an answer question. How much? How much? If someone examined your life, observed your life, how would they know how much you trusted God? Would they say, well, Pastor Brian trusts his life mostly with God except for this little part over here or this big part over here? Would they notice that there's a part of your life that you don't trust God with, that you figure you need to hang on to and you need to control because He is going to do something with it you don't like or I don't like, or that we just don't know what He's going to do with it, so we don't want to give it to Him? How much do you acknowledge God in your life? In how many areas? And how many areas, is there an area you don't acknowledge God? And here Solomon says in the end of verse 6, in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He shall direct your paths. So if we're not doing that, there's part of it we're not acknowledging Him. What is the result? He's not going to direct us in the same way or with the same clarity as if we are acknowledging Him in all our ways. I know that this is a reality that's tough, but the idea is the same thing as wisdom. We're progressing in that direction, and we're desiring to acknowledge Him in all our ways, not just some. So I think we have time to handle verses 7 and 8, and we'll be done for this evening. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. So verse 7, where would you put it in our window pane? Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. Yeah, absolutely, because it talks about the fear of the Lord. Also, the idea of being willing, I think, teachable, because you're not being wise in your own eyes. And then you could add to that, obviously, principle, who are you listening to? How easy is it to be wise in your own eyes? Do you have to work at that? No, Dan said, yeah, no, it's pretty easy, right? But note the connection with verse 6. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. And then he turns around and says, the negative aspect, don't be wise in your own eyes. And what's the other half of it? He says, don't be wise in your own eyes, but, there's no but there, I'm adding that, but the context is a contrast. What's the second half of the verse tell us? Fear the Lord and depart from evil. Is it easy or hard to depart from evil? We had a good discussion in our the men's Sunday school class this morning about, I forget what the title of the chapter was, but the idea about the fact that, why do we not live completely and totally for God? Well, we like certain things, and we don't want to say no to things that we think we're going to enjoy, even though we might know they're bad. It's hard to flee evil sometimes. Some things that might tempt me not to flee are not going to tempt you, and vice versa. But there's an aspect that we don't want to depart from evil because there is some level of pleasure, some level of reward in it. But we're not looking down the road to see where it's going to lead it. We're just looking at this one moment in time and say, I'm going to enjoy this, and I'm not going to depart from it. Verse 8, and we'll finish with this one tonight. It will be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. So where does this Proverbs 3:8 fit in the window pane? Okay, principle. My first choice was the end. It's going to the result of following God, of growing in wisdom. And these are some practical things. So what are some practical things of fearing the Lord and departing from evil according to verse 8? Okay, there's a lot of things we do in our life that aren't healthy. So he says, if you do this, it's going to be health to your flesh and strength to your bones. What might this look like practically? If we're pursuing wisdom, how might it benefit us physically? Peace of mind? Why do you say that would be a benefit physically, Dan? Yeah, so how many of you have wrestled with, did I say the right thing? Did I do the right thing? Lost sleep over things like that. And what does that do to your... And then that's just a small thing. Well, no, I mean, losing a little bit of sleep is not a significant health issue, but long term it can be. If there are tangible, practical benefits to doing life God's way, to growing in wisdom, pursuing wisdom, why don't we do it, or why don't we do it more often? That's a thought question, not an answer question. You want to be right, and sometimes, what's that? When I'm wrong, okay. Want to be right when I'm wrong, yeah. So how are you doing at fearing the Lord, departing from evil? How often and how consistently would your life be described as fearing the Lord and departing from evil versus doing what you want to do and pursuing evil, being wise in your own eyes? So more than once a day for some of us, Dan. Not you, me. Any other comments, questions about verses 1 through 8? We'll pick up in verse 9 next week, Lord willing. All right, let's close in prayer. Father God, we thank you for our time in your word. We thank you for the challenge to think about and consider in our own life our pursuit of wisdom versus our pursuit of being right in our own eyes, of leaning on our understanding versus trusting in you with all our heart and leaning on your understanding. Help us to grow in that from our study in Proverbs and our time in your word on our own. We thank you for the time today in your house of getting refocused to begin our week, getting in line with you, your word, your expectations, your truth. We thank you for those who worked hard to teach your word in Sunday school and are now doing it downstairs with the teens and helped us worship well. May you be pleased with what went on today and our attitudes as we did it. And we ask that we would be ready for what this week brings, that we would be seeking to lean on you and on your understanding with our whole heart and acknowledge you in all areas of our lives, not just being wise in our own eyes and seeking our own desires. We thank you for this in Christ's name. Amen.